Hello fellow humans and welcome to this video, and today I'm going to review the entire E50M line and then also play all of them to see whether this line is worth it and whether you should consider grinding it. I definitely do think that it is worth it, so now let's get into, first of all, comparing how the tanks stack up against each other and then also playing them and going a bit into more detail. So now let's have a look at this in Blitz stars, and obviously what you can immediately see is that the higher tier tanks are better than lower tier tanks, which is by no means surprising. Now, if you want me to compare each of these tanks to a tank or to multiple tanks of the same tier, then I can do that for the next one. And if you enjoy this kind of series, then also put that in the comments. Would really appreciate some feedback on what do you think of this, because then I obviously could do this for a lot of the lines, but please don't make me do the tanks Joe ones. But anyway, now we're going to start off with tier 6 and all the way up to tier 8, because I don't think that the tiers below, they're not really that relevant, I think. So we're going to start at tier 6 and then go up. Now, what we have here, we have 1800 DPM and 160 alpha damage, and that retains on the Panther. However, you do get a lot more DPM here. And then, when you go to tier 8, you step it down on the DPM, but you get more penetration and more alpha damage. So basically, in relation here, the Panther 1 has a better gun than the Panther 2, because obviously just 5mm of penetration more doesn't really make up for most of it. Then we have a quite big step up from the Panther 2 to the E50. It's just because the Panther 2 is pretty much the ugly duckling of this line. We have 3000 DPM here and 350 alpha damage. However, only 220mm of penetration, which is not really great for tier 9. And then also the APCR isn't really amazing. Fun fact, by the way, this APCR with this exact penetration used to be the standard rounds of the E50M, but they nerfed the standard rounds of the E50M down to 257mm. And then the E50M, obviously, with the highest DPM here, and also the highest penetration, and retains the same alpha damage from the E50. Basically, what we have here is we have a very gradual, very good step up, only blocked really by the Panther 2, which I think should get a bit more penetration or a bit more DPM to just make it a bit more balanced and put it a bit more in line. And then what we also have here is we have a gradual increase in aim time, really, except for the E50, but we don't talk about that gun. And the actually stays the same for most of the tanks, always around 1.30, and then we go down quite a lot on the E50M, obviously making it quite a bit more active and accurate at tier 10, which is always a great thing to have. Then all of them have 8 degrees of gun depression except for the Panther, but that I think does depend on what gun you're using, so it's not great, but I do think that the Panther overall is a bit, tier for tier at least, better than the Panther 2 here. Now obviously not in a direct comparison, I mean it's like that doesn't work. And then the same with the mobility. They're relatively similar in terms of mobility. Obviously the VK31D is the fastest here, and then we go down till we hit the low point at the Panther 2, and then we go back up again to 21 on the E50M, which is really great. But it's also weird to have like a curve like that, but again, same point. Make the Panther 2 either just do something, just buff it a bit. Come on, do something, Wargaming, just something. And then what we can also see down here, in terms of their performances, yeah, it is very much obvious that the Panther 2 is the weak spot here and does need some love. And in terms of the armor, obviously, they are all a step up. The Panther 2, as you can see, 4mm less here. Yeah. And then, obviously, these don't really have that much armor for their tier. Most of same tier tanks can still penetrate them relatively easily. Lower tier tanks are going to struggle. While with the E50, and especially with the E50M, same tier tanks, tier 9s and tier 10s, are going to have some trouble actually going through the front plates of these vehicles. And on the E50M, also, the turret, especially at 162mm on the front, is very, very well angled at both the tier 9 and the tier 10, so it is going to be very hard to actually get through there. Now, keep in mind that these things down here aren't really 100% representative, because the E50M always comes equipped with its full configuration, and the stock gameplay does weigh these down quite a lot more than they should be weighed down, but I think the trend is somewhat visible here. That the E50M, tier for tier, probably is the best performing, and is also the one that should be interesting the most, while the Panther 2 is the most disappointing, and I would definitely recommend this tank to be grinded in a fun mode like Gravity or Mad Games or something like that to get around that problem. Now we're gonna start off with the tier 6, and obviously if you've already done some of these or whatever, don't just skip forward to the ones that are interesting to you. Obviously, I don't get mad at you or anything like that. Watch whatever you want, and if you enjoy it, that is very nice. So thank you for your time that you dedicate towards me. So let's also dedicate some shots into the enemy team, ideally. And also have to watch out for that Skoda up there. That's map awareness. You know, you have to know. Basically, if you want to be a really good player, the one thing, the most important thing is you have to know where the enemy is without looking at them. Really, you know, look at the minimap and what is happening. That is a skill that is very, very important, especially for medium tanks like this one that doesn't really have much armor. And something that this Panther obviously clearly lacks. He's not looking around himself, and he doesn't know that I'm here, so I can essentially get some free damage here if he does poke properly. Now, not ideally that the team here is a bit falling apart, which is not ideal, but we're doing 800 damage as of now, and that is somewhat fine. The biggest threat is always going to be that E50M at over 3000 DPM, which is, I don't know why that tank is allowed to exist. And then also, the worst thing that you can have as a team is pretty much you have the advantage on one side, yeah, you have more people over here, and then you still get wrecked, which is a bit unfortunate. But let's continue to maybe get some shots into the Skoda if he does decide to peek, because obviously fighting a sphere with significantly higher alpha damage is not a great thing, especially if you're a low tier tank. You want to avoid the high tier ones in direct confrontation and try to shoot at them when they're not looking at you, and then again that requires some map awareness and some knowledge. But you're gonna acquire that if you play this tank for 40 to 50 battles at least, then I think you will be somewhat ready for at least the next two tanks, because while the tank is the line is very consistent as in how it plays, as you've already seen with the mobility being somewhat making sense, there are a lot of differences in it as well, especially in the armor part, where I don't want to do that, where the lower tier tanks don't really benefit from their armor as much as the higher tier ones do. So, and that's actually not too bad, because obviously if you learn how to play the non-armored tanks, you're probably gonna have it a lot easier with the armored tanks. And I'm not having it easy here, because this is basically a 1 versus 3 at this point against 2 tier 7s, which this tank is absolutely not designed for. This is more of a second line medium, rather, because obviously it's very big and not very well armored, so the tall size is also a thing that goes through the entire line and is pretty much retained through all of it, which, to be fair, isn't that bad of a thing. But the AT-15 is doing good there by protecting the 40 TP from his unknowingness. But as you can see here, 1.5k damage. That is somewhat decent and for a tank like this one. Nope, that was not it. And now let's try to get out. Use the mobility. It's not amazing, obviously, as you can see. The acceleration could certainly be better. I could get out. But overall, I do think that this is a decent tank. And that on your way to the E50M, you're not going to be dragged down by this tank quite a lot. And now, obviously, I do think that that guy is going to be the best of players. I think that was a hit. So, yeah. The T-71 seems to be a somewhat decent to good player. But he's a one-shot, so let's see what we can do there. Obviously, I'm tryharding way too much for this being tier 7, but still I want to show you it a bit for the video. So, they're now camping. I don't know. I mean, the thing is, the T-71 could be camping in either of these bushes, which would obviously not be very great for me, because I would get instantly spotted and I would die. So, there we go. Let's get another shot. The T-71 doesn't seem to be over there, otherwise I would be dead. Okay, 1.8k damage. Let's get unspotted. You know, that's something that you should always do. Get yourself unspotted. Oh, he pounced. Okay, 129. I said decent player. Yeah, just decent. So, but let's try. Now, the 40 TP is somewhat healthy. Lucky boy. Yeah, mate, I'm sorry. I'm playing a tier 6 like a tryhard. That's not right. That is just very not right. So let's go back around the other way, which is a trick that you should always be using as well. Especially... What are you doing, mate? Come on, just hit me. You got this. I believe in you. You can do it, you know? One day, you'll grow up and you'll actually be able to hit me. You know, you can do it. Damn. 2.5k damage, which is very solid. I mean, I'm just gonna play it out here. He missed again. The AT is probably going to cap, and I might have to give him that at this point, but let's try and fake him a bit, and now there is he and gone. And now the 88 has 20 seconds left. Has 1 minute 25. What is this? What is this game actually? What is this game? You got an ace. And that'd be nice if I can get ace all 5 of them, but I'm not gonna be playing that many games. So he's probably hiding inside the house. So no, he's not actually. And decapped. Okay, that's it then. Now all I have to do is hide and disappear. He can't cap. It's only 1 minute. So basically that's it here, and we move on to the next tank. Solid. So essentially we now move on to the Panther, which is a very good step up, especially in the DPM compartment. Now the armor can be relatively effective, especially against tier 6 tanks, but we're not in a tier 6 game here, and against any tier 8 this thing is basically just paper from the front, which is not really that amazing. Now the gun is very long, and you have 160 alpha damage, which a lot of tier 7 mediums do have. Something like a Comet is also very similar to this one. And again, you do have an absolutely massive vehicle. However, you have one advantage compared to the real-world Panther. The real-world Panther's final drive would last about 150 kilometers. In Blitz, you don't have that problem, which is great. So be happy that this is not reality. And that's why I like video games. Because they're cool. Most of the time, at least. So, what you don't want to have in a medium tank like this is you don't want to have them bunched up like that, because the more bunched up they are, the more concentrated fire they'll have on you. And you don't want to do that. When you have a medium tank, you want to split them as much as possible, so that you can get around different angles and move around. And especially do that if you are in a high-performance medium, like an E50M, that is basically built to take hits as well. And not a flimsy little Object 140, which absolutely hurts me to say, but something like an Object 140 that has been completely neglected for years, where you do need to be a lot more careful. And also a Leopard, which is just a cannon on wheels with no armor. But that is obviously something only for a very experienced player. This line is very, very easy to play. This is, I think, the best beginner medium tank line that you could go for. They are relatively big. That is a downside. But the armor isn't paper. The guns aren't bad, except for the Panther 2, which, again, will come up next and should be receiving some buff. And, yeah, now this one is a great tier 7. Now, a great tier 7 still can't beat a average tier 8 most of the time, so that is something that you have to definitely watch out for. And as you can see there, 246 millimeters of penetration of the T-34 are not enough to go through the front plate if it is angled properly, and that was a T-29 there as well. So, no, he can try again. I'll give him that. As you can see, it can work, especially if you're angling it properly. Is a flat plate. You will be fine. Oh, mate, I'm sorry that I know how to angle the armor, but nice try, mate. You tried, so that's fine. Anyway. Oh, no, come on, don't be that guy. Don't be that guy, come on. That's not cool. Don't be that guy, guys. Oh, no, that's a bit sad. Anyway, now, the T-29 is probably... He might peek, because he can... Never mind, he's not. He's turning away, so that's good for me. And now I can push him, pretty much, and miss, actually. I don't know where that shot went. It definitely didn't go through, like the commander said there. But again, that is a good 2,400 damage there for the Panther. And I think it is a very nice tank to play at tier 7 and definitely worth getting. So now we get to the problem of this line, and that is the Panther 2. Which, on the face of it, it can be a decent tank. Compared to what everything else is at tier 8, this thing is a bit underwhelming because it's relatively slow. It doesn't have that much armor, and it also doesn't have a really amazing gun either. Mind you, the DPM on this thing is worse than that of the Panther, and also only has 5mm more penetration than the Panther for one whole tier higher, which obviously that's not amazing. You are gonna, obviously, because they have somewhat decent armor still, you are gonna get bounces and whatever from tier 7s very many times. So what are you doing, TVP? I'm a bit confused as to what the enemy team is doing here, but that's whatever they're doing. So let's try to side scrape these guys a bit, and they're a bit campy, so that's going to be somewhat fine. The TVP is obviously now going to push me, but I got some decent guys behind me, so we're fine here. Ideally, I want to stay alive here, not be penned by an LTTB again. And there you go. Keep angling tier 7s. It can defend against those relatively well, especially if you keep the tank wiggling back and forth. At that point, you do have very effective armor against the tier 7 tanks, but don't even try against most tier 8s because they're just going to go straight through, unless it's very extreme angles, like for example with that T-34 that you saw in the Panther game. On everything else, it's going to be somewhat of a flat angle. It's just going to go straight through. So this is a downgrade compared to the Panther tier for tier, which is very sad because this tank could be relatively nice, but it just isn't, and that is depressing. Now, what do I think should be done to this vehicle? I do think that it should go somewhere along the lines of a Pershing. Maybe just give it about 150 to 200 more DPM and see how it goes, because that might already be enough to elevate this thing from pretty much tier to somewhat decent, which is pretty much all it needs to be. So now, another trick, by the way, is you can shoot through here. There are a lot of holes like that you can shoot through, so make use of them. And I might die here, actually. No, I will not. Beautiful. I got rushed. I got completely overwhelmed, but the Panther is still standing somehow, and I didn't die there either. So, as you can see, while it is not an amazing tank, it can be a very sturdy tank. And, yeah, is he reloading? I think he's reloading. So, yeah, basically, if you can skip one tank of this line, make it this one. And then we're going to move on to the E50, which is stock. The E50 stock is absolutely miserable because it's basically just a Panther at tier 9. So, try to also avoid that. So, ideally, what you want to do is get the Panther 2, play the Panther 2 in fun modes like Mad Games or Gravity, where it doesn't really matter how well you do, and then try to use your free XP to get the modules for the E50 and upgrade it as much as possible, so that there you're not going to run into any very nasty surprises with the E50. And now we get to the E50, and the biggest downside of this vehicle is basically the penetration, which is absolutely abysmal. Now, 270 on the APCR is somewhat decent, so that is fine. However, because it's APCR calibrated, doesn't make much sense, so I wouldn't really use that here. And obviously, I'm also going to do a full equipment overview at the end of the video as well, so stay tuned if you want to see that. Now, ideally, I just thought about that. I should probably do that as well, so this is like... sorry for not saying it earlier, but here we are. And also, sorry for talking too fast sometimes. I just can't really help that. So, yeah. Now, E50. It's a good tank, I think, relatively. It's nothing outstanding, nothing amazing, but it's also no ML2, which is an absolute donkey of a vehicle. So, overall, it is, I'd say, above average. That's the best way to put it with this vehicle. It has more DPM and more armor than the MX-30B, so that is already something nice there, which definitely does help it. And the turret isn't as great, obviously, as on the E50M. The E50M has an absolutely amazing turret. This one is decent. However, another upside is you have this sort of cone-shaped gun mantlet, which does help you deflect shots quite a lot. Another thing that is very important to know if you want to play well in Blitz is you have to know when to get out and when to get in. So, yeah, is that tank going to push me, and is he not? So that is also very important to know. Now, can we go for the 60p? No, we cannot get a shot. Batchat might traverse here, which would be somewhat beneficial for me, but in the end he is disappearing, and I'll just take a random snapshot into the middle of nothingness. So, I think that's fine. Now, we're going to go for the 60 TP. And he's probably getting clipped. Yeah, he's getting clipped by the 57 Heavy, but I might get the final blow here, which would be very nice. Obviously. Don't know where the Batcher went, though. He's probably... Yeah, there he is. I'm going to take a shot from that guy. And now he is a one-shot. And we do have a full health 183 up there, so... let's try to hide somewhat. Don't want to... I can't shoot through all the houses here. And, yeah, as you can see, I can't take that shot, unfortunately. So, ouchie. Thank you very much. That is... Yes, that's the Brigetto still sitting up there, which is not great. So, we're going to get ourselves unspotted here. Obviously, the 57 Heavy and the E100 were in the completely wrong position, and they did go city, which is really bad, because you don't get any map control, and you can't really get out to then win. Basically, the main thing that you then have to hope for is that the enemy just throws the win to you, which the ML seems to be doing quite well. So, let's take another shot here at him, and, oh, there's the Brigetto. That's not good. He can clip me, so I'm going to have to make him bounce one shot, and he's not going to do that. Probably. And there we go. 3,200 damage, though, is a very good result. So we'll leave it there. And now we're going to move on to the E50M. I probably should do that with all the tanks individually, so let's do that for the next one. Provisions, ammo, stuff like that would always use the same. Consumables also. Provisions, always use the first three if you can. And then with the ammo, use about 50% to 60% standard rounds, then 30% APCR, and then the rest HE. And then that will work out just fine. Before we get to the E50M, let's get into the consumables and the equipment and stuff like that. Obviously, ideally, you want to fully upgrade every single tank. That's the first thing. Consumables, you always use the same three. Whatever orientation you put them is your choice, but I would always recommend using these three. Same with the provisions. If you can afford them, then go for these three. If you can't, if you're broke, then I would recommend the chocolate and the standard fuel, and maybe also the protective kit, because obviously if you have the protective kit, that might save you a repair kit here and there. Then the ammo, I would go 50 to 60% of AP, then about 30 to 40% APCR, and then fill up the rest with HE on all the tanks here. And then with the equipment, use gun armor on all of them. And then I would also go for the enhanced gun laying drive and the vertex stabilizer for all 5 of them, because obviously the medium tanks, they're meant to move around and play from mobility, so that is perfectly fine there. And then the same with the rest of the consumables, the equipment slots rather. Just I would recommend these, especially for the E50M. The improved modules are very, very important. Definitely use the improved module in the E50M because of the ramming damage. These tanks are heavy, so use the improved modules so you can get some rams on some light tanks and medium tanks. And then I would go for the improved assembly for the tier 6, and then for enhanced armor for all the other ones above, and obviously the toolbox. And now we get to the E50M, the most well-rounded, if not best, tier 10 medium tank you can get. Unfortunately, the heavies are going to the bad side, which is not great, and unfortunately the Leopard is also following them. Now, you don't want to go over there because obviously it's all flat, which means if you get trapped there, you can't get out without getting shot at, and you also don't have a lot of map control over there, so ideally you don't want to go there no matter what tank, especially on this map. Now, look at that poor little Object 140. There is not much he can do. He doesn't have the armor, and he also has less alpha damage, which is not great. He also has less gun depression, so not even there he can do something about it. Now, if those two guys would move, they could actually redeem themselves by encircling the enemy, you know, by coming from the back, and then just distracting them that way. That would be very useful, and that they definitely should do that. Because, for example, that way, that side can be useful, but most of the time, it's not. So, we're going to continue to just use this rock here. The E50M is very high. It's a very big tank, which is also why it's good at ramming. But it can still hide behind something like this, and it can also poke around a lot of walls that some other tanks might not be able to poke around. Like an STB or an Object 140 might not be able to go as high as this, which does somewhat benefit the E50M, because you do have a bit more armor, a bit more tank sticking out that you can use there. Now, oh, hello there. Oh, he's just looking somewhere else, which is great. And as you can see, we have the map control. We have completely encircled them, and that's a win right here. And that's how you do it. That is great. That's a very, very good team there, and that is very nice to see. What was also nice to see is that we're almost at 3,000 damage. Now all I'm going to have to do is I have to rock back and forth. But the turret profile is actually relatively small because it's rather long rather than wide, which is very good for the E50M because that makes the turret relatively hard to hit as well, compared to, let's say, a turret that is a lot bigger like that of an AMX-30B, but then again, that thing is a joke. So let's now go and take another shot on the 183 ideally. Boom, amazing accuracy, amazing everything essentially about this tank. There is no downside to this vehicle. Obviously, it's not perfect, but there are essentially no downsides to this vehicle that are any major concerns, which is great. And now we also get rid of the Vickers, and we end the video with a very nice, very cool 4,500 damage game in the E50M. And if that didn't convince you to grind the E50M, then I don't know what did. And if you enjoyed this series, if I should do more, put it in the comments. And also tell me what to improve, because obviously this is the first one, so I don't really know how to do this yet. So how do I improve it? What do you think? Put it in the comments, and see you for the next one. Goodbye.